Well, welcome to this webinar. This is our winning childcare partnerships. I don't even know how to begin with how to begin this, because this has really taken some organization and some partnerships between a lot of different groups. And so I want to thank the state chamber for for hosting this. I'm Mike Feakin. I'm the strategic partnerships advisor with First Five Nebraska. First Five Nebraska, if you're not familiar with us, we are a statewide nonpartisan public policy organization that focuses on early childhood education. My background is in economic development. I was an economic development director in St. Paul, Nebraska for many, many years. And so First Five understood that there is a strong connection and that there are intersections between economic development, workforce development, and early childhood education. And so with that, I'm currently the president of Nebraska Economic Developers Association. And so between all of our organizations, all of our groups, we were able to organize this webinar session on childcare partnerships, and in particular, some of the activities around the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. So there are maybe some housekeeping things or some announcements to talk about with ARPA. So right now, through the Nebraska Department of Labor, and I'm going to put the link in the chat right there. If you go to that site right there, there are a couple of programs through Department of Labor from the ARPA allocation to the state that focuses on teacher recruitment and teacher retainment grants for childcare and preschool. And then there's also some workforce development grants that there is some eligibility for childcare. You just need to go through the application process and talk with Department of Labor to see how exactly that works. Those are two of the programs that we know of right now. We do know that from Department of Health and Human Services later on in December and also in January of next year, there will be more programs. So you'll want to, keep track of communications from the Nebraska Economic Developers Association, the state chamber, because I'm sure that when some of those programs, when those details are released, that we'll have more information and potentially more webinars, that type of thing, to showcase the guidelines and the eligibility for those programs. One of those programs, in fact, is going to be business partnerships. And so we don't know all the details there. We do know that there is money set aside for communities and businesses that are seeking solutions and seeking solutions for early childhood. And so one of the major things, or what we wanted to do for today then, is showcase a community that because every community has its own unique needs, and we know that public and private entities and through partnerships really are our best solution in trying to look at early childhood education solutions. So as a level set, we are going to show a video from Gothenburg, Nebraska, and then we will have our two experts, Colton and Nicole. They are going to talk about how they were able to look at unique partnerships for their project, and you'll learn so much more than what I can mumble through. But let's do a level set. Let's show this video from Gothenburg, part of the My Nebraska Story series that was a project of First Five Nebraska. So with that, take it away, Nicole.
When we found out we were having twins, it was kind of like, oh my gosh, what do I do? I was currently employed and knew that I was going to be taking my maternity leave and then going back to work. We are very fortunate that we were able to find 2 spots available to take our children in a place that we knew they were safe. I don't like to think about the other options that we would have had to sacrifice if we wouldn't have had a place to take our children.
We're the largest employer in town, and we employ a lot of people that have kids. There was a time a few years ago where we'd hired a manager level position, and that person only worked for us for about 3 weeks, and then gave notice and said, "We can't find childcare, so we're gonna have to leave."
We took that very, very seriously. As our community and our workforce has continued to grow, we realized that childcare is an even bigger need. I think without childcare, we don't have a workforce.
Our ultimate goal is for people to come to Gothenburg, easier access to childcare, I think would really just kind of finish the puzzle.
Well, I think that Gothenburg is doing a wonderful job of really trying to explore all available options.
We took steps to try to expand the early childhood offerings that were available within our community. I think we've made a lot of progress on that front, but I think we still have an opportunity to continue to do better.
It's the community coming together as a whole that gets things done, and I think that really sets Gothenburg apart.
The first early childhood task force includes representatives from the school, the city, the hospital, and economic development. Each one of those different committee members has added value and perspective.
If you want to have the people that do have children involved in your workforce, then everybody matters.
But when we work together and collaborate, it's amazing what we can accomplish together.
This is a story about working parents.
This is a story about economic development.
This is a story about quality childcare.
This is a story about Gothenburg.
What's your role in this story?
So that gives you a kind of a nice look at what issues were being faced and what set Gothenburg down the direction of a major project. And I think one of the takeaways here is that as we know more about the release of future ARPA dollars through some ARPA programs, that there needs to be some preparation, and there needs to be some steps that need to go through first. And so when putting all of this stuff together on a community-wide basis through, again, these public and private entities, I think that this is a good opportunity to hear an example of who's done it and who's doing it good. So with that, I will turn it over to Colton Venteicher and Nicole Hetz from Gothenburg.
Thanks, Mike. And thanks to you and First Five for asking us to be on, and Holly with the State Chamber for coordinating this. We're really proud of what we're doing in Gothenburg. We've always been pretty proud of what we're doing. Some folks may say too proud, but this is a great opportunity for us to be able to showcase really what we think is a successful approach to fixing a very big issue when it comes to not just childcare, but economic development and community development as a whole. So with that, just a short introduction. I'm an attorney in Gothenburg. I practice primarily in the areas of economic development, work with an individual who's been the preeminent authority on tax increment financing for quite some time. And I know Holly's trying to get to the next slide. We'll get there. And so I see this from a different perspective. I don't have an early education background. I have a business background. And so when we talk about these pieces, and I think that's helpful with the State Chamber discussion, is we look at this from truly an economic development standpoint. Yes, the science is important and we know what that information is, but economic development wise, where are we situated? I see we've got the slides up, so good job, Holly. I do sit on our local economic development board, but I also chair the Gothenburg Early Childhood Learning Coalition. That's our local nonprofit entity that we formed a few years ago to move the ball forward on this issue. Very pleased today to be joined by Nicole Hetz. As you can see, she's our GECLC community coordinator. Basically, she is our boots on the ground, our individual who every day wakes up and goes to sleep thinking about how do we get this solution moving forward, and actually helps us get a lot of these things done. As I'm sure you see in a lot of your communities, we have a lot of volunteers tied to this progress. And so having a dedicated employee help out with that is important. And Nicole has been absolutely instrumental in Gothenburg. So the next slide here, really we started, I would say, in earnest this conversation in 2018. There had been some ad hoc approaches to what we were going to do with early childhood. But prior to that, the school had applied and received a grant for a public preschool program, but we knew we had a bigger issue, and I'll get into that in a minute. But who was involved in the conversation? We had our local school administration. They knew that early childhood was important. They didn't necessarily want to be, as some folks say, in the business of daycare. I don't like hearing that, but at the end of the day, we understand we have limited budgets, and taking care of 0 to 3 or even preschool age kids may not be within the scope of that public school. But we did have them at the table in terms of trying to figure out what the solution would be. We had our local providers coming together. They knew they were at capacity. They knew they were barely making any money, if any, on their programs. And they knew that as a community, we had a severe lack of capacity. And so they were willing to sit down with us and work towards finding that solution. And then, like I said earlier, and as you saw in that video, early childhood is economic development. We really take that to heart here in Gothenburg. Ultimately, as you heard from the hospital, they're the largest employer in town. They have 170 employees, and they have lost employees. I know our local vet recently lost an employee because they just couldn't find childcare. In Gothenburg, we have a 12-month wait list for infants to receive childcare. But it goes beyond that. Some of you may be familiar with Baldwin Filters. They have a plant in Kearney. They used to have a plant in Gothenburg. And in 2018, they came to us and said, hey, we're closing down the Gothenburg plant. We're consolidating that in Kearney. Fast forward about a year, we heard of a potential recruitment, went to Sioux Falls, Iowa, and met with a company called Curb Tender. They make garbage trucks. So we sat down with their president and their CEO, and within 15 minutes of that conversation, they asked us, okay, what's the childcare situation like in Gothenburg? We don't want to move to a place where we're going to have these issues. They knew that we were taking that seriously. Ultimately, they've added a new plant in Gothenburg in that 100,000 square foot facility, and we're happy to have them be the only garbage truck manufacturer here in Gothenburg, here in Nebraska. So the next slide here. So how did we get started? There we go. GECLC, our nonprofit organized. So like I said, we had kind of an ad hoc approach, but we did form a 501c3 nonprofit entity that was made up of 3 representatives from the school, 3 representatives from our different providers in the community, and then myself from an economic development perspective. The next piece that we were able to take on as far as moving items forward is we worked with Nebraska Children and Families Foundation and the Communities for Kids program and received an initial planning grant. And what we were able to tell from that grant was what were our local needs. And we were able to identify that those local needs, we had 70 kids that simply did not have access to licensed childcare in our community. And we knew we had a significant gap. We also knew when we were looking at expanding access that the funding model for childcare is broken, right? When we look at this from solely a private business standpoint, you charge what you can charge and you hope to cover your expenses and make a little bit of profit at the end. Well, we know that our parents are limited with the ability on what they're able to pay. And so the market keeps those prices down, but we still have to have quality programs. And so what that leads to is having to cut corners. We pay people minimum wage, or we don't invest in our facilities as much as we need to, or we have centers that actually lose money. And so that model in and of itself is broken, and obviously a big part of the reason why we don't see new childcare facilities popping up. So we knew with that approach that we would need to tackle that piece. And then we also knew as a community, we needed a full-time employee to help us move things forward. We're all busy in our day jobs. It was simply impossible for us to figure all of those pieces out. What we were able to do after identifying those needs is we engaged an architect, figure out what the facility would look like in terms of size and scope. And ultimately, we came up with this solution. We call it the Gothenburg Impact Center, obviously aptly named because we hope to make the biggest impact with this facility on our community as possible. So the next slide, you'll see one component of this facility is our early learning center. This is a center that at capacity and including after school age kids can reach about 280 to 290 kids in our community. That's 0 to 5-year-olds, that's 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. care. The way that we are going to do that is we have 2 learning centers here in town. They're both are struggling, so they can only pay people minimum wage. And so what we have done is we've agreed with them. They will consolidate their facilities into this impact center. We will pay people $15 and $12 an hour. How we do that, I'll get to in a second. We'll also bring in the public preschool. A big part of providing this solution was ensuring that we still have that access, but also partner with our public preschool or with our public school that's already been part of this process. So like I said, over 200 kids in our community, that will give us the capacity that we need. We know that if this facility gets full, then our school is getting so full that they're needing to expand. And then we're having a bigger community discussion. So this will take care of the issue in the long run. The next slide, and this is a big part of really where this project starts to pull other things from our community, is as we had these conversations, we kept getting feedback from people. Hey, I understand childcare is an important issue, but, and one of the biggest buts that we heard was, as a community, we don't have an event center where folks can host larger events. We can't have wedding receptions in town. Oftentimes we use a farmer's metal Quonset building south of town. And that's been a conversation with the city of Gothenburg for quite a number of years. And so as we looked at this, we said, okay, if we're already building a facility and we're already going to have an operating entity in that facility, maybe we can tack this onto it and create a partnership with that city, which I'll get into later as well. Another component with that is, as we had conversations with these early childhood folks, 200 plus kids, that's a lot of kids coming through our doors at a centralized location. We know that some of those kids and families might be having some issues at home. And so we do have that healthy family services component where we will be able to provide centralized access to things like budgeting, parent coaching, different pieces to help support those families. Also simple things like a giving closet and a food pantry component. And then the last piece is, we knew with this facility, 200 plus kids, we have bad weather, you're going to have a large space where kids need to run around. And so instead of just making a large space that would just be used by that early childhood facility, we talked with our different partners. We worked with the YMCA in town. We worked with the baseball and softball programs. And we said, hey, if we're going to build a facility that's large enough for kids to utilize during the day, do you think we could turn it into something that you could use as a multi-purpose or a practice facility in the evenings? And so that's that sports center component. And so this is the floor plan that we've got set up. You'll see we have the classrooms on the bottom left side in that form of an L. That's 17 classrooms. And there would be space to expand if we ultimately needed to. Just on the southeast side of the building is that healthy family services piece. And then on the north side, you'll see the event center tied into the sports center. So that event center is a 400-person capacity event center. But actually, we could make it bigger if we needed to, and we could have overflow into the sports center piece. So if we wanted to host even larger events, we could do so. So how did we get this all done? It took a lot of partnership. First and foremost, we had to go through the planning pieces initially. And that really took a partnership between the city, the school, and the hospital. We approached them and we said, hey, we've received some grant money from this Community for Kids program. And we've been able to do a few things, but we really need to hire a full-time employee. They knew that this was an important piece for our community. You saw the hospital CEO talk on that video about how it was something they've run into. Nate Wyatt, who's the president of our economic development group, and spoke on that video, as well as also our school board president. We had individuals from these entities who were invested in this. And so it wasn't that difficult for us to come to them and say, okay, city and hospital, can you give us $10,000 a year? School, can you give us $20,000 a year to help us pay for a portion of that salary? They signed on to that for a 2-year period. We just extended that and increased the numbers a little bit through that interlocal agreement for another 2 years. And what we'll be able to do with the Impact Center is ultimately get rid of that piece, because that facility will absorb that position. So a small investment from those entities through the interlocal agreement to help us move the ball forward over a 4-year period to get us to a sustainable solution. And how this turns into a sustainable solution, if you click for the next points, is how are we funding this Impact Center project? Ultimately, thanks very much to inflation, what was an $11 million project is about a $13.5 to $14 million project now. That's going to take some braided funding. So we're going to raise over $5 million from our local private individuals and businesses. We've raised 3.2 to date. We'll raise some money from different state programs, and Mike hit on the potential for ARPA dollars, which we'll get into a little bit more here in a bit. We've partnered with foundations out of Omaha and Lincoln, who ultimately have given almost $4 million to the project, and we expect to see about 4.7 come in. And the rest of the piece, we've looked to those interlocal partners. Again, we're solving issues for the community as a whole. Instead of going to the school and saying, hey, we have a childcare problem, and having them back up and say, nope, we're not in the business of daycare. We got together with them and said, how can we come up with a public-private solution where each of us bears a certain a part of this burden? And so we see this in dollars and cents. So with the facility, the school will put in $1.5 million, and the city will put in $900,000 of general fund money and $600,000 of LB 840 dollars. So $3 million from our local entities, but they also took it a step farther. Like I said, the business model when it comes to childcare is broken. There's no disputing that fact. But we knew, okay, building a nice big new facility isn't going to solve that. We need to have some level of cushioning in that budget to help ensure that we have sustainability for this project. So remember, the school had a public preschool program. That costs them about $175,000 a year, but we're absorbing that program. They're still going to allocate that $175,000 a year. It's going to help our bottom line. We can operate childcare more efficiently than the school because we're not subject to Rule 11. And ultimately, what costs them right now to benefit 15 kids at $7,500 per pupil, they'll use that same investment. They'll benefit 120 kids, and it'll cost them about $700 per pupil. So while we talk about these solutions, we are understanding that we can't just have a government entity come in and fix all of these pieces. We need to have that partnership. Same thing goes with the city. Like I said, the city had frequently been asked about an event center, and one of their holdoffs was they would have to pay to operate that. They'd have to have an employee. They'd have to pay for overhead and maintenance on the facility. Well, we could take that on, but we quantified generally what we would be saving the city. And ultimately, we will see $100,000 a year come in to the operating budget of the Impact Center to help us pay those people $15, $12 an hour and ensure that we have sustainability out into the future. So just a couple of points I want to hit on before I kick it over to Nicole here. We can talk about this interlocal structure. quite a bit because it creates a lot of benefits for us. Namely, and just very briefly, this facility is going to be owned by an interlocal agency that's made up between the city and the school. They will lease it to a nonprofit operating entity, but that means with this $14 million budget, we're not subject to sales tax. That's a $750,000 delta on our budget that we can move away because we're using this structure. The second piece is we can utilize that structure to obtain financing. So some of these contributions, whether it's from foundations or from these public entities, will stretch over a number of years. Well, we can use that interlocal agency to issue debt in order to help finance this project. It's going to save us tens of thousands of dollars on interest down the road. Now, that brings us all full circle with public-private partnerships. And I would tell you, we can't do any of this without having our businesses involved. I talked about the $40,000 that comes in for our operations or has come in for operations from those public entities. At the same time, we have a community partners program where we have businesses provide sponsorship dollars for our entity. Ultimately, we see anywhere from $12,000 to $15,000 a year come in from those partnerships, and they go right back out to providing scholarships to children within our community. But they stepped up even more when it came time to look at this project. Like I said, we've raised over $3.2 million. We have 2 locally owned banks, each of which is going to contribute over $1 million. They're going to buy the debt, so our financing is going to be local, and we'll see favorable rates. Ultimately, Nicole's going to get into, okay, how do we start that process? But those partnerships have been truly the linchpin of the success that we've seen here in Gothenburg. So with that, we'll kick it over to the next slide, and my great colleague Nicole Hetz can kind of give you some ideas on how to get started if you're not 4 years down the road in this process like we are.
Thank you. Exactly. So that's a very quick snapshot of what it's taken us 4 years to do. And, recognizing that a lot of communities don't have 4 years before some of these grant opportunities present themselves, I just wanted to share a couple ideas, ways that a community who maybe hasn't thought about this issue or has thought about it but hasn't moved forward with it can get started right now. One of the first things that a community can do is to identify the local stakeholders. Find the people who know about the issue of childcare, who care about the issue, who have a voice in the community, and who have a stake in the success. So that could be your local providers, your business owners, your chamber members, but start looking around at the people that you want to engage in this conversation. The thing that really helped us move forward when we started this conversation in the community was quantifying our local need. We were able to take census data for children under 5 with all available parents working and compare that to the licensed spots that DHHS reported. So some very simple math to find out if you have enough licensed spots in your community for the children who need it. If you don't, there's a very simple statistic that you can start sharing right away. And also talk to your school district. Our school district was terrific with sharing their school readiness scores. When we started this process 4 years ago, they took a survey, a very simple survey, all kindergarten parents, and it was simply, where did your child attend preschool? And it was list the preschool provider or my child didn't go to preschool. And they were able to correlate those survey answers with that child's school readiness score and show anonymously how preschool, the quality and the availability of preschool was affecting our school readiness scores, talking about our children in our community, talking about the grandchildren or the children of the business owners and others in the community. So talk to your school district. They can be a great resource in helping you get some of that data. And then talk to working parents, talk to employers, talk to your childcare providers. They can all give you specific examples that you can use as you go and start these conversations. Your childcare providers most likely will have wait lists. You can get numbers. How many kids in your community are waiting for a licensed childcare spot? So starting to get some data that is applicable to your community is a great way to catch people's attention. Another thing is to find somebody to tell your story. Like Colton said, we decided that having somebody who could devote time to this effort and help move it forward was important. We have found that in communities, in order to kind of move the needle, having somebody like that is really pretty essential. It could be a volunteer, it could be a part-time coordinator to start with, but find somebody who has the skills to do the job and get them on board. I will tell you, I have no background in early childhood, but I was able to learn the content and come in and start working with the community. So sometimes your early childhood educators aren't the best community spokespeople, but they are the ones to provide that spokesperson with the information. So try to find somebody who can help dedicate time and move the process forward. And then also look for some advocates in your community, business owners, economic development groups, your chamber director, your chamber members, people in your community who can understand the issue and speak on your behalf in the circles that they're moving in. Then engage your community. As you get these pieces in place, then talk to your current providers. Just listen to their stories. Find out what their experiences are. Every community is different. Every childcare provider has a different story, but listen to their stories, hear their struggles, and you can get facts and numbers from them. Then ask them the question, what do they need to address a quality gap they might be feeling? Or ask them what they need to increase capacity. Sometimes it's as simple as being able to hire an employee and take 4 more kids in their in-home, changing from an in-home 1 to an in-home 2. They might have ideas on what they need, and they just need somebody to ask and to listen to their answers. Educate the public on the importance of positive early childhood experiences. If you're not familiar with brain science, and I know that sounds kind of scary, but just Google infant brain science. All of the top research will pop up, charts, graphs. It's amazing what they know about infant brain science and what community members don't know. 90% of a person's brain is developed by the age of 3. There's a lot going on those first 3 years, and educating parents and community members about the importance of those years really can help with the conversation. A great local resource is the Buffett Early Childhood Institute website. They've got data and links and all sorts of information ready to pull off and share. The other thing we did, we were just present at every community event. We still are. Every Halloween giveaway, every visit with Santa, Easter, Fall Festival, you name it, we were there handing out information on early childhood brain science, handing out facts, educating the community, educating parents about the importance of the issue. You can also promote what's currently available, help your providers get the word out about what they do have available. Connect with them and ask them to give you their information to share. Maybe it's in the newspaper one week, maybe it's a flyer pinned up somewhere. There's also a resource, Nebraska Childcare Referral Network, a website where parents can go in and search by area, and it will list all of the licensed childcare providers in that area with specific information. So a great resource for parents who are looking for childcare. And then educate the public on the need, because most of those childcare providers that you find on the Nebraska Childcare Referral Network will be full. So help your community understand that there isn't enough space in high quality programs for the children who need it. So find out what that gap number is and use that in your community to educate those who would come around the table. Finally, create a plan to close that gap number and start working your plan. I guess that's what we have for how we got started, and I think we're ready for questions, Mike.
Yep, I believe so. So if you have questions, go ahead and write them down, and we will get to them. I don't know, Holly or Jenna, if we have some that are submitted, but I guess I have some just to begin with. So can you talk about if there was an unlikely ally that came to the table and you're like, wow, I can't believe that you're for early childhood education, you're for the Impact Center. I guess, can you talk to that?
Sure. So one of the things we did early on, we had a lunch meeting, kind of I don't even remember if it was the Rotary group or if it was just something we hosted, but a lot of business owners, and one of our business owners was an older gentleman who listened to the presentation and very earnestly and very seriously asked the question, trying to understand the economics of early childhood. Would it be more economic for families if a parent stayed home? Like, would that, and it was a very earnest question. And we were able to have a conversation and show why that didn't work for every family, and had great conversation, talked about the brain science. And within a week, he was in my office. He had done all of this research and he was so excited. And he is now one of our biggest advocates. He is for our efforts. He is for the Impact Center. He is recruiting people to be part of our effort. He has become one of our great champions, all because we had a lunch and we engaged in the conversation and shared the facts with him. He's been great.
Was that the lunch that I presented at? Oh,
yes, it was.
Wow, amazing.
Yes, it was.
You may not have remembered that, Mike, because Nicole really softened that delivery a little bit. He said, "Why can't the moms just stay home?" Right? And he very seriously just thought, "Well, that's how it used to be. That would be how it worked." But like Nicole said, he's a huge advocate now. So.
That's great. Can you, Colton, I guess, can you address maybe what some of the affordability or accessibility, what that looks like, how you're addressing that?
Yep. So this has taken quite a bit, I would say. And this does go into the question I saw come up in the chat as far as staffing, how are we going to staff it, right? So like I said, we know the model is broken, but we want to be able to pay people actual livable wages. We think that that's going to help us recruit better talent when it comes to trying to find employees. So that $15 an hour and $12 an hour wage based on experience and your role in the classroom certainly is going to be better than the minimum wage that our current centers are able to offer. But ultimately what we did, Mike, was we took the number of kids that we knew would be in the facility based on those kids being in any of these other facilities that are currently operating, figured out what our classroom sizes would be, what our requirements for teachers would be, worked through obviously operations, payroll, all those pieces, and came up with our deficit. We knew there would be a deficit, weren't afraid of that necessarily, but what that gave us was a target to go out and say, okay, if we're going to do this the right way, we need to see some of that support. And so that's where we see the city and the school contributing ultimately $275,000 towards the program. We'll also do some different fundraising pieces within the community, similar to what we already do with that Community Partners program to help supplement that piece. Now, the accessibility is very important for us. In Gothenburg, we like to say all means all. there's a way to set up this business model where you do make money, and that means you charge very high rates. I'm not saying that that's wrong, but then that would cut out a certain segment of our population, right? And so we are going to keep our rates. They'll increase about 10% from where they're at right now on average. We will accept state subsidy, but we've also built into the budget scholarships. And so any given year, we will give about $50,000 to $60,000 in scholarships for those folks that don't qualify for state subsidy. Maybe they make just a little bit too much, but can't pay full price. And so we'll tier those individuals in, so we do have that accessibility.
We do have some questions, but just real quick as a follow-up, was that 50 to 60 in scholarships? Is that part of your operational budget, or is that part of a fundraising endowment that you're doing right now?
So right now that's built in with the operational budget. We do envision having some type of raise for an endowment to help support that, and maybe even supplant the city and the school's contributions down the road. But in order to get this moving forward as quickly as possible, we just built it into the budget. Good question.
And when you were working with your budget, was there a template that you were kind of going at, like where can folks, because they, I wouldn't have a first clue of how to build a performa or anything with childcare. Was there a template or somewhere that you went to find that?
Yeah, we didn't have a clue either. And we talked with a lot of people, which is an important part and something that is so great about being a part of Communities for Kids and working with First Five and Nebraska Children is we're connected with people who have done this. And so we did work with some folks, saw how they built their budgets. I would say we have a bit of our own twist on it that we are happy to share. And so it's a multi-layered Excel sheet that requires some assumptions and can spit out really the important number that you're looking for, so you can get those pro formas from that.
Okay, so we've got questions in here. So I think maybe we've addressed the staffing of the center. Major roadblocks or concerns that you came across through discussions in planning?
I would say one of our big roadblocks that we saw that we didn't really anticipate going into it is we announced this project right around when, as a state, we were having a very big conversation about healthcare standards when it came to our public school systems. And the question on how will curriculum be developed and who will have oversight and control. Do we have any donors that might have strings attached to money or anything like that? I think all reasonable questions and questions that we were able to answer, but certainly an important piece that, again, we hadn't anticipated, just as I'm sure a lot of public schools weren't anticipating some of those pieces. And then the second piece, and I hit on this earlier, inflation and the issues that we've seen with supply chains have been extremely difficult for us. Just coming up with budgets on a $14 million project, any small variation can swing that pretty significantly. Even when it comes to financing, a percentage point goes a long ways. And so it's left a lot of uncertainty. But the benefit is we've had those conversations with those partners, with our lenders from the very beginning. And so while we're going into it cautiously, we do have everybody on board. So there is that optimism as well.
Okay, so the current providers, I guess what are the thoughts in the community from, well, community as a whole, and then also, yeah, the current providers, are they worried about losing staff and losing business?
Yep. And that's a great question. And one of the most important pieces to us getting this started in the beginning. Again, we knew we had a gap of 70 kids. We identified that. We knew that the solution probably entailed a new facility. And so what we did was we sat down with every existing provider and said, okay, are you at capacity? Of course I'm at capacity. Can you get any bigger? Do you want to get any bigger? No. Okay, so if the solution involves a new facility, how do you either become a part of it if you want to be, or work with us so that we ensure that when we do this, we are also coordinating with you and not hurting you. So we don't really have a concern when it comes to employees, because our 2 centers are going to be a part of this program that leaves only in-home providers. And certainly if they want to join us, they can, but also we like options for our community. But another piece is, and I didn't hit on this earlier, is our hospital, again, the largest employer in town. I didn't mention them in terms of a cash contribution or a capital contribution, but what they have committed to is providing employer-provided childcare as a benefit for every one of their employees. And we talked to them. Initially, it was just going to be for the Impact Center, but we advocated on behalf of those other providers and said, if you're going to do this, we would like it. And I know I froze. We advocated on behalf of those existing providers, and they're going to provide that benefit to any licensed provider in town, not just the Impact Center.
Wow, that's good. That's great. That's awesome. I think we are through the questions, I believe. I think we've answered them all. And I know everyone is busy. They've got to get on with their own schedule. So I think we can sign off. I do want to just kind of make a reminder that if you have the opportunity, go check out the Department of Labor's site for the ARPA programs. Again, there's the teacher recruitment and retention grants, and then there's also workforce development grants. And then coming up in December, there will be workforce grant program through Department of Health and Human Services, which will feature the student loan forgiveness for childcare providers. That will be in December. And then in January is when we expect to see the business partnership grants. And so stay tuned, same bat time, same bat channel for further information, webinars, that type of thing. So Nicole, thank you. Colton, thank you. Holly and Jeno, State Chamber, thank you very much. And, I guess thank you to all the attendees. If you have further questions, go ahead and just, email any one of us or give us a call. And I guess unless there's anything else, Holly, we'll just shut her down.
That is all. Thank you all for joining us. We will follow up with a recording of the webinar and some contact information, because I don't know about you, but I found the information very compelling and very helpful. And I have a feeling a number of folks will be knocking on your door. So thank you so much to all 3 of you. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week when we talk about internships. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.